Miss Emma Hardinge Britten. Is the Darwinian theory consistent with spiritual philosophy? There are two sources from which a spiritualist, or one influenced by spirits, would answer the question. One, the known facts of science; the other, the affirmation of the spirits. The known facts of science obviously point back to a condition when this earth in its rudimental state did not bear animated life. We trace up, by geology, all the various rudimental conditions which preceded animated life. We arrive at the condition when we find that the first forms were very simple, that the first animated creatures could scarcely be called organic, mere gelatinous masses floating in the ancient seas are the first evidence that we possess of life. As we turn page after page of the old stone book, we arrive at a conception of animated life which most admirably conforms to our observations of the present time. Rudimental growth, proceeding first from a point, becomes, under the influence of the tropical conditions that once prevailed over all the earth, luxuriant, large, and monstrous. But still these monstrous forms are yet rudimental as compared with man. For we find, as we examine the conformation of the lower creatures, that each one is more or less a prophecy of man. The formation of heart, brain, spine, and especially the means of locomotion, and the powers of communicating with each other possessed by the lower creatures, are all on a gradually ascending scale, not of development, for we believe that every species is complete. We realize that the great and marvellous mind that is incarnated in the production of species has practiced, so to speak, with every species in its perfection. That when matter has been fully prepared in one direction from its decay and disintegration, the atoms by isomorphism are progressed, that old rocks by disintegration and perpetual recomposition become finer, and the atoms become more capable of sustaining a higher form of life. As the atmosphere becomes purer and finer, creatures of a more fine and complex nature are produced, but all our rudimental observations upon the geological strata of the earth point to the fact that man is the last, as he is the apex of creation. We use the word creation now simply to signify the production of forms, but from the point where we begin to discover the vestiges of humanity, and they are few and imperfect, and the data they furnish us only enable us to speculate vaguely upon what must have been his condition. From the point when we first observe these vestiges, it is obvious that man was produced sparsely and in different portions of the globe at the same time. It is said that the earliest vestiges of human habitation are troglodyte, and are to be observed in Central Asia, and that must have been inhabited by a very small woolly-headed people. This conforms to the universal order which we observe in the production of our species. If man, a portion of all species, a microism of all that is, conforms to the universal order of the production of beings below him. He comes in the natural development of time just when the earth is ready for him, just when the atoms are progressed enough to produce him, and he comes like the flora and fauna that have covered the globe, first on the lowest plane of human life, gradually ascending from this condition of primeval savagism, as he spreads abroad over the earth and multiplies, we find that his vocal organs improve. Where we perceive the original savage, now we always perceive a deficiency in the vocal organs by which speech is produced. And when we question what is the line of demarcation between man and the animal, we find it is his capacity to walk erect and his power of communicating by speech. This is the chief line of demarcation that separates him from the lower creatures. The savage is most commonly imperfect in the methods of communicating by speech, and from the point where he begins to improve in this direction by the inevitable growth and perfection of the species, which seems to be the order of creation generally, from that point we find that by intercommunion of man and man, ideas are interchanged. The friction of mind upon mind produces the sparks of intellect, and these lay the foundations of civilization. You will perceive, therefore, that our views of the production of species are to some extent in harmony with the Darwinian theory. To enter fully into this tonight would occupy too much time. Therefore we shall turn very briefly to the opinions propounded by spirits upon this point. Every spirit, as it passes from this earth, carries with it just the amount of intelligence which it has gleaned in this rudimental sphere. If that intelligence be of an expansive character, all intelligence gains force and momentum in the spirit world as in the natural world, and the spirit progresses rapidly beyond his old theories. If perchance he enters the spirit world very much as too many of us upon this earth do, with his theories bound about him more closely than his winding sheet, cramping his spirit with a predetermination only to admit just such views as conform to his theories, he returns again and yet again to the spirit circle, repeating the old tale of theory and re-endorsing all the narrow and peculiar views with which he left the earth. Now the corrective to this is the fact that all spirits who appeal to reason rather than to the demonstration of their presence point to the observations of science upon such questions as belong to the scientist to explain. Every spirit who does not usurp authority over the human mind and come with a "thus saith the Spirit" to dogmatize to you, desires you to prove all things before you hold fast by any. And to do this they point back, as we would have you do this night, to the observations which science can furnish, assured that the great facts of the universe will never be disturbed by the communications of spirits, In fact, they come to restore to you the scriptures that the All-Father has written. They come to point you back to this original standard, to the works of the mighty and the masterful, rather than the assertions which men have made in his name. The old stone book, although we may frequently mistake it in the reading, nevertheless tells a tale which only requires observation and experience to read correctly. Its hieroglyphics never change. Its writings never fail. The history of the race is inscribed by the finger of the Infinite himself in the starry scriptures of the skies, and in every stratum of rock beneath our feet. Those who best learn to explain these, those who will gauge the heights of air, measure the stars, sound the eternal depths of creation, and fear not to tread upon the pathways which our God has himself marked out for us. Observation and experience guided by the lamp of reason. Those who thus read will perceive that species, animate species, like the flora and fauna of our earth, have grown and manifested themselves when the conditions for life and that class of life were afforded. That to afford this the progress of every atom has been absolutely necessary, that not for thousands but for millions of years the great God has worked in the laboratory of creation, and in the crucible of central fires, and in the depths of ancient seas, and in the manufacture of the crust of our earth, has prepared atom by atom until first the rudiments of animated life appear, and then upon the gradually ascending scale every creature has come forth, until the coronal glory of man appears, first in the paradisical state of that rude ignorance, which he indeed calls childlike innocence, then in the gradual unfolding of his intellect, until he stands in the glory of civilization.